Testing. Is this working? Yeah. Okay, we'll get the show on the road. We have a really big shoe for you today, right here on our stage. My name is Mark Brandt, and along with Bill Norsworthy, we are the co-facilitators of the UU Humanists of Clearwater. A couple of housekeeping announcements before we start. We do have expenses for our speakers, so we're going to pass the hat. Give freely, 50s and 100s gladly accepted. And if you'll pass that all around, would appreciate it. And the other thing is that we go to lunch. We make our speaker work, but then he gets a free lunch at Carrabba's. So if anybody wants to come to Carrabba's with us, you're welcome. It's first come, first served basis, and we'll seat as many as we can, but there's no guarantees. But come and you'd have a chance to talk further with Fish. Our speaker today is the executive director of the American Humanist Association. His name is Fish Stark. His scientific name is Fishes out of Waterus. And he may tell you how he came by that sobriquet sometime during his talk. Fish was raised in Annapolis, Maryland. His father, for a number of years, was a U.S. congressman and was the only openly non-theistic member of Congress for a number of years, Pete Stark. After high school, Fish matriculated at Yale and Harvard, and he can tell you a little bit about that. But he has been the executive director now for the American Humanist Association for, what, the last year or so? 8 months. So he has had time to fully gestate during that period. So anyway, it is a real pleasure to have him here. He's an engaging speaker. I'm sure you'll enjoy him. So please welcome Fish Stark.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Thank you all for having me. I notice you pass the hat around first before I start talking, and that way, if I offend you, you can't really come up and take the money back. I don't know how many controversial things I'm going to have to say. I am a fellow UU humanist, so I'm one of those rare breeds like you who exists at the middle of what I call the world's most beautiful Venn diagram. And I'm here to talk to you today about hope. And I realize there's some irony in coming to Florida to talk about hope. Don't get me wrong, you guys have great exports. My fiance is a Florida export. She grew up in Coral Springs, and I met her when she was moving to Washington, D.C. to go to graduate school. She is a secular Jew, which makes ours an interfaithless marriage. And I've dragged her along to Unitarian Church with me, and she gamely participates, although sometimes she calls us the island of misfit goys. But she's all right. She's all right. So keep sending us I was going to say your daughters, but humanism requires me to ground myself in objective reality. So keep sending us your granddaughters. But I have to respectfully ask that you stop inflicting your politicians on us. So Ron DeSantis and I both went to Yale and Harvard. That's about where the similarities end. When I was a teacher, I didn't drink with my underage students. And I don't have to wear high-heeled boots to tell people I'm 6'1". I mean, the irony of telling people that they aren't allowed to change their body because God gave it to them when you can't tell the truth about being 5'8". It's pretty rich. And if I had his kind of power, I wouldn't use it to kick tens of thousands of kids off Medicaid and reject free federal aid to help low-income parents buy groceries. That's why a few months ago we actually came down here and we partnered with the Humanists of Florida and the Central Florida Free Thought Community and the Humanists of Tallahassee to give thousands of dollars worth of holiday gifts to families who are affected by DeSantis' war on the poor. We called the campaign, Stop Ron DeSantis' War on Christmas. Next slide. And we ran these ads in the Tallahassee Democrat. We ran full-page ads. I didn't realize that was going to be a little small. Because we are tired of the sanctimonious paternalism of these Christian nationalists who tell us we are morally defunct because we don't mouth the right words from their book in the right order, while they conveniently developed amnesia about the parts of their own book where they are commanded to feed the hungry, heal the sick, welcome the stranger. These people claim to be so interested in our morality without appearing to have any of their own. Next slide. Half of my job is answering people who ask the question, what is humanism? And if I have 5 seconds, I tell them humanism is for anyone who believes in the golden rule, but not in God. If I have a little more time, I tell them it's for anyone who believes that science tells us what is real and empathy tells us what is right. It is about believing in people, in human dignity, the idea that people are inherently good and worthy without needing to be saved or redeemed, in human potential, the idea that there is no problem we can't solve, no truth we can't uncover, as long as we live in societies that protect the right to think freely, and in human responsibility, that it is our highest good, our highest moral obligation to look out for each other, not because we're divinely commanded to do it, but because it makes the world stronger and safer and more joyful. It's about purpose, it's about dignity, and it's about love. We don't need to believe in a higher power to aim higher for ourselves and society. Our capacity to evolve from fish and build civilizations is in itself an awesome miracle, and maybe all the miraculousness that we need. Often when I share that definition of humanism, I hear, well, I guess I'm a humanist. And we believe there are 45 million humanists in America who don't know it yet. They're broadly non-theist, they're broadly progressive, and they are searching for something to belong to and believe in. It's a tough job to try and reach those 45 million people and bring them into humanism. You might wonder why the hell someone would decide to take a job like this. After all, humanists are known simultaneously for being the most moral and most cantankerous religious group. We call it the skeptic's curse. There's the old joke. Anyone ever heard the joke, 2 Jews, 3 opinions? For humanists, the joke goes 2 humanists, 4.5 opinions, and a philosophical debate about whether you can have half an opinion. So to start with how I got here, I'll answer the obvious question early. No, fish is not my given name. And I find that a strange question because I don't go up to people and ask, hey, is your name really Bill? But I understand. It's uncommon. My father, Fortney Hillman Stark Jr., rarely used his given name either. Most folks in the humanist and secular movement know him as Pete Stark, the first open atheist in Congress. That was how his friends and family knew it too. He occasionally went by Fortney when he was about my age, giving rise to a hilarious incident where a tongue-tied news anchor introduced him as local banker Fartney Stork. But when I was born, it was decided that I would be named Fortney Hillman Stark III for reasons that were very understandable. I was not consulted at the time. I developed an opinion on the matter several years later when it became very clear that the name Fortney was a very challenging name to have as a boy in the 1st grade. And not just any boy. I was a very feminine little boy who was bad at sports, and I wore tortoiseshell glasses, and I was always sneaking a copy of the Babysitter's Club under my desk. And Fortney, being just a couple letters off from the girl's name, Courtney, poured gasoline on the fire. It was an excellent target. It was proof that I was a sissy and all the other things that came along with that. And so as I saw it, I had 2 options. I could change my name or learn to fight. And in the Stark family, you could be anything you wanted to be. You could even be religious, although this was explicitly not encouraged. But you had to be a pacifist. And so I set about looking for a new name for myself because I didn't want to choose option B and get disowned. I wrote down on the back of a Martin Luther King ... which I understand is banned in Florida schools now, my initials, FHS. And to me, that looked a lot like fish. which sounded cool and hip and edgy. I was quite sure that a boy named Fish wouldn't get bullied, which was not true. So, my parents, my teachers, my friends weren't quite sure why I wanted to be called Fish or how long it would last, but nevertheless, I persisted because to me as a 6-year-old, my dad's name fit me about as well as one of his neckties, but Fish felt like the sneakers that you'd finally broken in. And so from then on, everyone, from bosses to grandparents, has called me Fish. I've done a lot of work with young people over the course of my career, and I like to tell that story to them, not because I think more people should change their names, although we just hired someone at the AHA who legally changed his middle name to Adventure, which I think is pretty cool. But to remind them that there are a lot of things in the world we don't get to choose. But the one thing we do get to choose is what we believe and how we define ourselves. We're the people who get to write our own stories. We can't control a lot of things, but we can control who we are and how we show up. And to me, a fundamental ethic of humanism is about freedom and self-determination for all people. Yes, we live in a world shaped by forces beyond us, but we also have a fundamental right to decide what we believe, how we live our lives with ethics and reason and compassion as our guide. I was raised in a humanist home. I don't have any religious trauma to overcome. I had good luck that I want to pass along. To be raised humanist as a kid is to be raised with a sense of possibility and responsibility. The two things we know give a child the confidence and the self-worth they need to navigate life's obstacles. We were raised with an awareness of the world in all its glories and flaws, and a sense that with enough hard work and honest living, we had it within ourselves to do something about them. In my father's house, there were only 2 sins, cowardice and quitting. He taught us all that there is no glory in giving up the good fight and no honor in being halfway honest. He modeled for me and for many of us the courage that we need at a time like this. When I went off to college, I had the good fortune of being one of the few students who actually had a humanist chaplain on his campus. So we had a guy named Chris Stedman, whose books some of you may have read, who would lead weekly dinners and Sunday morning gatherings at Yale, and he would help kids who were vibrating with ambition figure out what the hell they'd feel good about doing with it. And so I embarked on a career in what I call applied humanism, which a lot of people would call education. And I studied the work of the humanistic psychologists, people like Dewey and Maslow and Carl Rogers, one of whom signed the Humanist Manifesto, the other 2 of whom were former Humanists of the Year. I did that at Yale and then for graduate school at Harvard. And they awakened me to a truth that humanists have been trying to teach for decades, but the right-wing education reformers have been trying to make us forget, which is that education is not about filling kids' heads with the right facts or the right values, but giving them the tools to find the right answers on their own, to ask good questions, to understand for themselves how things work, including their own minds and hopes and aspirations, to develop a sense of purpose that leads them to deeper motivation and wisdom and joy, to be citizens who can shape a better future, not just workers automating a more productive version of the present. And so I spent my 20s using data and research to build programs that help children believe in themselves and do right by others. I helped run a mentorship program in the West Virginia coal fields with the American Friends Service Committee. I traveled the world working with organizations like Lady Gaga's Foundation and the Red Cross to transform their youth development programming and training youth activists for peace and democracy in the global South. And then I joined the founding team of a tech startup that built apps to improve children's mental health. And everywhere I went, I saw the same truth repeated. That people want to feel a sense of power over their own lives and circumstances. They want to feel like they have what it takes to change the deeply unjust world they live in, but they need someone or something to tell them that it's possible. And this is the power of belief systems. They don't just tell us what they ought to do. They help us believe in what we can do. They give us reasons to believe that better things are possible. They give us models to emulate. The Christian who admires the saints or believes I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me is not so different than the humanist who believes we have Spock and Sagan and Gloria Steinem and Jonas Salk who show us our own way. We're going to talk about our strategy for growing humanism that we have at the AHA, but I want to start by asking why. Why are we thinking about doing this? I didn't realize the screen was going to be this small. I'm sorry if you can't read it. I want people to take a moment and imagine how it felt the first time you realized there was a word for what you believed. that being a humanist or that being an atheist or that being a Unitarian meant you weren't someone who was alone in your way of thinking about the world, but that it connected you to a group of amazing people like the ones in this room, to a tradition. Ultimately, we live in a country where we're experiencing a wellness crisis right now. People are torn apart by loneliness and purposelessness and social isolation. And the more we can give people something to believe in, the more we can heal those divides that are ripping at the root of America. We also have to realize that it is safe for us to gather in this space, but there are places in this country where it is not safe for people like us to gather. You know, one of the most powerful things I've read in the past few months is the research of Dina Abbott, a psychology professor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, who studies the experiences of rural atheists and makes clear in stark reality for us just how many people in the rural parts of the reddest states are afraid to lose their jobs, lose their children in a custody case, even be subject to violence if they're open about not believing in God, or even fail to attend church and mouth the words along. And the final reason it's important to grow humanism is because humanists, when they come together, are an incredible force for collective action. Without humanists, we don't have Planned Parenthood. We don't have the March on Washington, which was planned by a humanist. We don't have the National Organization for Women, started by a humanist. We don't have the ACLU, started by a humanist. We don't have the UN Declaration of Human Rights, written by a humanist. And just as those institutions were built up to help us defeat the evils of McCarthyism and Nazism and Jim Crow and chauvinism and build the future we live in today, we need to build new institutions if we're going to defeat the resurgence of those same evils. But it'll only be possible if we're working together. So here's why, and I'm sorry, these graphs are too small. They're too small even when the slide is big. I'll explicate them. We have seen, if you look at that line that keeps going up on the graph, that's us. Those are the nothing in particulars, the nuns, the people who don't feel that they need a belief in the supernatural to guide their life. That is the growth of secularism over the last 20 years. That's the growth. Now, you've got people who say, oh, but it's leveling off because the last year of data showed that even though over the past 20 years we've doubled in size, maybe we're staying stagnant about 28%. I don't buy that. I used to work in the tech product space. If you add something that doubled in its growth over a time period and then started leveling off, you don't say this thing is defective and people don't want it anymore. You got to figure out how to market it better. And so what I do think is true is explained by the second graph, which breaks down this community of people who have left religion or are leaving religion. And again, if the font were big enough, I would be able to tell you only about half of the people on the graph say affirmatively, surely, certainly, I do not believe in God. Many people are agnostic. Many people who belong to our persuasion think, well, you can't prove a negative. Or I'm open to, maybe something could be proven in the future that I don't see possible now, and so I'm remaining open to possibility with humility. My point is that I think we have hit a ceiling of how far we can grow with anti-theist rhetoric. That's where our ceiling is. To grow even further, what we need is something more affirmative. Now, here's why I also believe we can grow. Next slide. The reason I believe we can grow is because the growth we've seen is durable and it's multi-generational. It's not just young people who are leaving religion. In fact, the group of people who are leaving religion at the highest rates are 30 to 50 years old. Not even my generation, not the people under 30. And in fact, the second highest rate of growth in the non-religious category is among seniors. So no, I don't think something that is growing stably over 20 years and that is growing across generations, that is growing faster with the elderly than the youth, is a fad or a flash in the pan. Next slide. We also see there's a variety of reasons that people are leaving religion. And I think this is important to point out and part of our strategy. Sometimes people come up to me and ask me, and I'm more than happy to talk about this, they ask me why we criticized Richard Dawkins, who is a humanist, for his polemical and demeaning language about transgender people. And I say, well, number one, because humanism has always been interested in the right of people to reject gender, right? Ever since John Stuart Mill in the 1800s wrote about the tyranny of custom and the need for experiments in living to have a truly free society, we have been on the side of people's rights to define their lives and their bodies and their identity for themselves. But the other reason that we stand firmly on the side of transgender inclusion is because I can read a damn graph. And if you could read that graph too, and I'm sorry you can't, you'd see that other than saying, well, I just generally didn't believe in the tradition or the teachings of my religion, the number one specific reason people are leaving religion is because of negative teachings in religion about LGBTQ people. And if young people are leaving religion looking for something that is more welcoming, more tolerant, we can't turn them away at the door with the same stuff they're trying to run away from. So, we know that there is already growth in people who are looking for something different, who have cast off religion, traditional religion, as an alternative for how they find meaning in their lives. And there's also a growth, not just in the rejectors, but in the searchers. So if we go to the next slide, one of the things that has been very true over the years is that, and we all know this, we see this in our communities, we probably see this in our grandkids, the number of people who are experiencing anxiety or depression, mental health challenges, has gone up exponentially in the last few decades. Now, over half of young people over 30 report dealing with some kind of anxiety or depression. And the number one cause that people under 30 cite for mental health issues is a feeling of meaninglessness and purposelessness. They're looking for meaning and purpose. And if we look at the next slide, what we see here is that rates of social isolation have gone up and up and up among young people. They don't feel connected to people anymore. They're spending less time with friends than ever before. We've got, 60% of men and 50% of women who report being lonely, and 1 in 5 people in America who meet the medical criteria for social isolation. So there is a lack of meaning and purpose in people's lives. There's a lack of connection. We know that people look to fill that lack of connection with a common identity. If we go to the next slide, here's how we know people are looking for something. First is that there are about 43% of people who say on a weekly or daily basis, they are looking for content on the internet that tells them about meaning and purpose. That's why you see more 30-year-old guys talking about Stoic philosophy and Marcus Aurelius recently, because they're going and they've rediscovered the Stoic philosophers on TikTok because they're looking so hard for something to give them a little bit of meaning. They've borne themselves back 2,000 years into the past. And if we look at the chart on the right, which we can see that graph going up, we know that book sales are down, but the only type of book sales, well, there are a couple of types, but the number one type of book sales that are up consistently in our country are self-help books. People are looking for something. As we slouch towards an increasingly atomized society, where people have fewer neighbors and fewer friends and feel less connected to the institutions they believe have failed them, we've got to ask, what is going to fill that void? And more than just video games and weed and all the things that people seem to be trying to numb themselves with, people are looking for something higher. Into that void has stepped a new generation of snake oil salesmen, people like Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Nick Fuentes, who offer the illusion of confidence through the psychology of hate and hierarchy. They say, especially to young men, you feel like you don't matter? Well, just imagine yourself at the top of an imaginary hierarchy and look down at all the people you think you're better than. But it doesn't last. Like any cheap high, it offers nothing but emptiness. What we know from humanistic psychology is that people find confidence not through superiority, but through self-efficacy, through purpose, through belonging. As Carl Rogers, the forefather of humanistic psychology and a former AHA Humanist of the Year, said, we need a strong self-concept to be well. And Albert Bandura, his student, showed us that self-efficacy, the belief in our capacity to overcome obstacles, comes from watching others do the same. That's why stories matter. That's why we're telling a lot more stories about humanism and why it matters to be a humanist. Because when people see someone who looks like them, thinks like them, overcome hardship, they believe that they can do it too. That's why humanists have to tell the stories of the incredible American heroes who have been humanists, because we offer real models of agency and resilience and moral courage for a time where people are looking to believe that it's possible for them. So I want to talk a little bit about how we're doing it. You guys are here to hear from somebody who runs an organization that many of you are members of, many of you donate to, and I appreciate that, and I want to tell you what we're doing with all that damn money. I say all that money. We have the budget of about 1/10 of your average megachurch. But here's what we do with it. So we're looking to give people, first, something to believe in. We are trying to develop content that teaches people about humanism in the same way people are going online to learn about the Stoics now. Something that meets people using the media they already consume to tell them about what humanism can bring to their lives. We've launched a free daily text series because people are now learning through text message, where people can get 3 times a week for free quotes of humanist wisdom sent directly to their phones. We've launched a parenting community because we know the number one thing bringing millennials back to religion after they've left it is having kids. And we believe there are lots of parents who want some sort of community that they can participate in to talk about morals and values without having God pushed on them. And we're going to be launching a TikTok and podcast space. I don't know who's on TikTok, but I know we all know about TikTok. The religious right has colonized the digital media space. They have made themselves the default. But the truth is, humanism has answers to those same questions about meaning and purpose, and we are doing ourselves a disservice if we don't establish ourselves as competition and put our own voices out there and tell the stories of the incredible legacy people can belong to if they choose humanism. A legacy of American rebels, a legacy of healers like Salk and inventors like Steve Wozniak. Next slide. People are looking for something to belong to. People are looking for communities like this. So not only are we increasing our targeted outreach to folks like Unitarians and effective altruists, but we've increased our local group staffing at the AHA by 150%. We've been hiring more people to help organize stronger local groups because we know that in this moment, when we've got a lot of isolation and we've got an economy and a crisis point with civil liberties, people are going to be looking for places to come to. And we want to make sure group leaders like Mark and Bill have all the resources they need to bring people together. We've launched a digital community on Discord that is open to anyone. We're going to make it the largest community of non-theists since the atheist forum on Reddit. And we're trying to bring in people whose primary method of community building is online, so they can start to feel comfortable and make connections on the internet and then bring them out into real community spaces like this one. And finally, we're going back to in-person conferences. If anyone's been to an AHA conference before, we hope you'll come to, or even if you haven't, we hope you'll come to our next one in Chicago at the end of June. We're going to be talking about, if ideas like Planned Parenthood and ACLU were the humanist inventions of the 20th century, what are the humanist inventions of the 21st century? How are we going to respond to this new world? Finally, we're looking to give people something to fight for. So we just relaunched our legal center. We hired a brilliant attorney from the organization Compassion and Choices. Folks know it's the sort of the leading edge of the medical aid and dying movement. And we're going to be fighting back against discrimination against atheists and humanists, especially in rural areas, defending that original principle of freedom of conscience. We are growing the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, the church-state separation caucus in Congress that we founded, faster than ever before. When my dad came out as the first open atheist in Congress, he was the only one, and there was only one state legislator anywhere in the country. Now we have over 75 state legislators as of the last election who identify with our community, including Anna Escamani right here in Florida, in Orlando. And we have, as of this congressional session, we've gone from 1 to 3 openly non-religious members of Congress. And we've added, just this last quarter, 5 new members of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus that supports church-state separation. With our team of lobbyists in D.C., we're growing representation for our movement faster than ever before. We're engaging in more state advocacy to stop the spread of private school vouchers, or as we call them, subsidies to private schools with our tax dollars, because we know most Americans don't want this massive giveaway to the religious right that we know degrades our schools and the quality of learning. And For those of you who follow national politics, we hired Ben Wickler's old comms director to help us lead rapid response efforts to fire back against the religious right and make sure that people see their overreach for what it is. Because people are looking for an alternative. We see it in public opinion polls now. People are already rejecting this unholy alliance between the billionaires and the bishops who are trying to distract Americans from the fact that their pockets are getting picked. They're trying their best to poke at every sore spot in America so they can cut their taxes while we're at each other's throats so that they can funnel our tax money into their mansions and mega churches. And as they've always done, they're using religion as their tool of control. They've got their followers whipped up into a frenzy, believing that the culture and community and way of life they're attached to will be torn apart and cast aside unless they can remain in power. But it's not true, and it's never been true. Because humanists aren't fighting for a world where everyone thinks the way we do. We're fighting for a world where everyone has the freedom to decide for themselves where they draw their inspiration and morality, that Jeffersonian ideal of freedom of conscience where no one is able to dictate someone else's way of making meaning. That's what scares the bishops and the billionaires. Because they know that whether we are black, white, or brown, whether we're immigrant or native born, whether we're transgender or not, most of us want the same things. We want the right to believe whatever we want. We want the ability to take care of ourselves and our families without needing to work 2 jobs. We want the knowledge that we live in a community where if we get old or if we get sick, we're going to be taken care of. We want the dignity of being treated like a human being rather than another function in another social media billionaire's money-making algorithm. That's why they have to keep us divided and isolated. That's why they try to pit the genders against each other over the idea of men's mental health while doing nothing to fix the platforms they own, which they know, because they see the data, are making all of us more isolated and depressed. That's why they try to stoke racial resentment over crime while they steal $50 billion a year in wage theft. They have to divide us, they have to distract us, they have to buy our elections and buy our representatives because they know they can't beat us in a fair fight. Because here's the deal. If we divide Americans by who believes in God and who doesn't, yes, the people in this room are a minority. But if you ask about humanist values, about the freedom of conscience, and the dignity of all people, about democracy and science, then we are the moral majority. They want us confused and divided, but the vast majority of Americans, a floor of 67%, believe that religious belief is a matter of opinion, not objective truth. They believe in the separation of religion and government. Over 80% of people say separation of church and state is a foundational principle. They believe you don't need to believe in God to be moral. And they believe that we need to protect each other and feed each other and lift each other up. They are not compelled by the politics of cruelty. Most Americans want a politics of sensible humanity. So that's why they fear us. Because humanism heals, and it dignifies, and it unites, and it threatens the systems that rely on people being too beaten down to fight back. American humanist Thomas Paine said, when he wrote his Common Sense pamphlet, exactly 250 years ago, these are the times that try men's souls. He was talking about life under tyranny and the psychological wound of knowing that you are living with something less than liberty. But he also said, we have it in our power to begin the world over again. So we've stopped whispering our message. The American Humanist Association is finding new language, reaching new people, and doing what Voltaire and Thomas Jefferson taught us, using mockery to unmask tyranny. Because as they say, faith without works is dead, and humanism without works is just arguing on Twitter. We've got to talk more about what we do believe in than what we don't, because people don't join movements for negation. They join them for meaning and identity and community. We've got to be able to tell the story of the legacy that we are trying to carry forward. We've got to invite people into something that lasts beyond them, because that's what everyone wants from their belief system. Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson believed deeply in the power of free minds and cast off monarchy to establish religious liberty as a cornerstone of democracy. Paine called it the liberty of conscience, the belief that true freedom begins with the right to think for ourselves. Frederick Douglass, an American humanist, carried that vision forward, demanding that America lived up to the words that Jefferson wrote but failed to honor, that we're all created equal. Douglas taught us that in the struggle for justice, the only reward is the opportunity to be in the struggle. Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan, American humanists, launched a movement that demanded equality for women under the law and in culture and in the workplace, driven by the humanist belief that people shouldn't be confined by outdated roles, but free to chart their own course. A. Philip Randolph was the chairman of the March on Washington as an American humanist because he knew that freedom without economic security was a hollow promise. His fight for civil rights was rooted in the idea that dignity belongs to all, not just those born into power. Harvey Milk, an American humanist, gave voice to queer liberation, not as a religious crusade, but as a human one, reminding us that visibility and authenticity can be revolutionary acts. Humanists also reshaped how we understand the mind. Carl Rogers emphasized empathy and authenticity. John Dewey helped us understand the link between democracy and education. Abraham Maslow gave us the hierarchy of needs. Ben Spock told generations of parents to trust and nurture their children's humanity, not suppress it. Steve Wozniak, an American humanist, created the personal computer, revolutionizing human potential by giving us these in our pocket. Jonas Salk cured polio and refused to combat the vaccine or patent the vaccine, saying, as an American humanist, could you patent the sun? And Albert Einstein, as an American humanist, urged ethical responsibility alongside scientific progress. Carl Sagan and Bill Nye, as American humanists, then brought that scientific progress to the masses, not as dogma, but as wonder. Their work told millions of young people, you can ask questions, and that's a good thing. Even our pop culture icons have carried the torch. Mark Twain used satire to expose moral hypocrisy. Kurt Vonnegut imagined more humane futures. Kristen Bell and Quinta Brunson on their television shows The Good Place and Abbott Elementary push boundaries and make compassion something that we can go to every week like a warm hug. They are artists of possibility. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that humanists tend to make damn good public policy. Barney Frank championed the Dodd-Frank Act, which reined in corporate greed after the 2008 crisis. Jamie Raskin today is our strongest defender of democracy in Congress, and Congressman Jared Huffman is our best defender of the natural resources we have. My dad's work gave us COBRA, the law that allows you to keep your health insurance if you lose your job or get a divorce, and EMTALA, the law that says if you go to an emergency room, you have to be seen and stabilized regardless of your ability to pay, the law that the Biden administration has used to defend women's rights to life-saving abortions here in Florida and in places like Texas. So we know that humanism leaves a rich legacy when we center reason and compassion and the truth of incredible innovation in America. And we want to invite more people into it. So we're reaching out to the 45 million humanists who don't know that's what they are, to the quiet doubters and the hopeful skeptics, to the lonely, the searching, the disillusioned, and we're saying, you're not alone. You belong here. We are not the modest minority they say we are. We together are the moral majority. For anyone who believes in the golden rule but not in God, for anyone who believes in compassion, not confession, for anyone who believes in love thy neighbor but not trust and obey, for anyone who believes that the best and greatest reward is living well and helping others in this life because it's the only one we know we have. That's humanism. It's been here since the founding. It's in our DNA. It terrifies the bishops and the billionaires, and it's building a better future because of the work that people in this room do. So, we all have an opportunity to decide the work that we'll do in this tenuous moment. Our team at the AHA is working around the clock to defend democracy and bring people into this movement. If you aren't a member of AHA, I'd ask you to consider becoming one, even if you're a member of this group. We're one of the few national organizations that does not charge dues to our chapters. So if you pay into the UU Humanist, that's great. At Clearwater, it's great, and you should keep doing it. But if you want to support the work that AHA does, the work that our attorneys and our lobbyists and our organizers are doing, then we ask that you go to AmericanHumanist.com, become a member. You'll get our magazine, which is a quarterly magazine of ideas and action. And you'll support the work that we're doing to bring this affirming philosophy to more people. Like Douglas said, in the struggle for justice, the only reward is the opportunity to be in the struggle. And as I like to say, as for me and my house, we will serve humanity. Thank you all so much. Amazing. I was trying to keep that right at 40 minutes, and I think I
Well,
did. So, all right, time for questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very uplifting.
Bill wants to pass the hat again, guys.
Galvanizing, energizing message. We really appreciate it. So does anybody have a quick question that they'd like to ask? Yeah.
Would you say that the Freedom from Religion organization, as well as the American Atheist Society, have the same goals as you have?
I think we have similar goals, and that's a good. So just to repeat the question, what was your name, sir? Reen. Asked whether American Atheists and Freedom from Religion Foundation have the same goals. And those are, I was just at American Atheist Conference last weekend, was on a panel with Nick Fish there, which is very confusing. He's their executive director. We look a lot alike, too. We wear plaid shirts and everything. So yeah, we're really proud to partner with them and Freedom from Religion Foundation. I think we have slightly different orientations. American Atheist does a lot of mobilization for state and local advocacy. They're the organization that you want to give to if you're really interested in saying, we want to do as much work in state legislatures with grassroots advocates as possible. They do that really well. We're the best organized on Capitol Hill, and Freedom from Religion Foundation has the largest team of lawyers, and they do the best job fighting things down in the courts. At the end of the day, all of the organizations in the secular space, when you put them together, have a combined budget of about $20 million. And that is about the budget of your average Dallas megachurch. So we work together to divide and conquer. We see our lane increasingly as creating humanism as an affirmative belief system that can invite even more people into the secular movement, which we think is going to lift up all of our organizations. But if you're supporting one, we hope you'll support them all.
Yes, Dave?
First of all, thank you very much. Fantastic.
Thank you.
My wife just whispered something in my ear that I was formulating. We have this symbiotic relationship, which is now 26 years old, and I love every moment of it. And she was right, and she was ahead of me, which is usually what happens. I was formulating what I'm about to say, and she had already formulated it.
My fiance does that too.
If
it's a good thing to have.
If all of us, we're all in the same age realm in this room, I would urge you as the lead organizer of the organization, if what you see in front of you is representative of similar types of presentations and groups that you see around the country, to grow, you don't need us. You need our children and our grandchildren sitting in the room with all of us so they hear and they learn what it is that you're espousing and what we believe in.
Yep. I'm with you. And can I say something? Here's where we are right now. As a secular movement, we are in the position that 10 years ago the environmental movement was in. If you think about it, the environmental movement, the Sierra Clubs and the League of Conservation Voters of the world, 10 years ago, those rooms looked a lot like this room. And over the past 10 years, we've seen the environmental movement become younger, become more racially diverse, because the truth is there's no movement in America that has ever won anything without being multi-generational, multiracial, and cross-class. Now, the question is, how did the environmental movement get there? They didn't stop talking to their base, their older base that they had been working with for a long time. They engaged them in building this new strategy to bring people along, and they said, we need your help and we need your resources to bring in these younger people. So I've been on I like to think about things in stages. In the startup world, we used to say, win the level, not the game. You got to get your first 50 customers and make them love you so you can get your 500 customers, and then you'll get your 5,000 customers. This year is about going to the people we already have and helping them believe in the idea that humanism can grow if we talk about it just this way, if we work in a concerned way to get on TikTok and podcast and really smartly leverage the tools that the right is using for online communication to young people and get people to invest in it. And I will tell you, Fundraising since I started at the AHA is up 80% year over year. We are seeing people invest in this vision, and I hope people here will too, and we've been able to hire incredible new leaders who are going to help us build these things and make them possible. So you're entirely right. We have to build outside of this room, but it is going to take the people in this room to make it happen. And then it's going to be all of us together moving forward towards change.
Yes, my question, which is a serious one, is where is your church? And what I mean by that is I don't see how you really form a lasting movement. People hunger for personal space, meetings together, interaction, and you can do a lot of work online, you can spread ideas, but you need a church.
I wouldn't disagree with you. And in fact, many of our chapters are ethical societies, Sunday assemblies, and oasis groups. So those are the three sort of things the humanist movement has that is more like a church. Now, I think in the next 5 years, what we're going to need to do is either acquire one of those groups, really acquire, a Sunday assembly or oasis type group, or start our own. Because I agree with you. I think there are a lot of people who want congregationalism, who want a place to come and belong and be in community with other people. So that's part of the long-term plan, that we're going to need to build those spaces. But the other thing I'd say is, young people, this generation of people who were raised with the internet, who never knew a world where a cell phone didn't have a screen, build community in entirely different ways. We spent a lot of time last week, we're talking with YouTubers. We were talking with the biggest atheist YouTuber. Turns out, what the atheist YouTubers want more than anything is someone to help them do research for their videos, and our policy team that writes fact sheets for Jamie Raskin can just take those fact sheets and give them to the YouTubers, and the YouTubers love them very much. So we're about to do some really exciting things with the biggest atheist YouTuber, Genetically Modified Skeptic, in a couple of weeks. But what those people are teaching us is that they're building on Discord and Patreon and this sort of pantheon of apps, these communities that they meet online and on video, and they're just as fervent and just as dedicated as any church. Now, to be clear, I don't think that's good. I think that, I think people need human connection and to meet face to face. I think that engenders empathy. I think people feel less alone. But I think what that can be is a new tool that is a bridge to bring people into in-person communities. And so we're going to make use of them both at the same time.
Thank you. That was a great talk, and I really appreciate the youthful energy that you're bringing to the society, and it sure sounds like you're on the right track with TikTok and some of the other media that caters to younger people. So I was just a little biographical curiosity. Yeah. I always admired the fact and often quoted that there was only one avowed atheist in Congress, and that was your dad. And so I was just wondering, how did he start? Was he an open atheist when he initially got elected? What district did he represent? And how many open atheists are there right now in Congress? There's like 535 members of Congress, and they tend to be more educated than your average person. So it just seems absurd that there would be only one or a few atheists. And
there are a ton. There are a ton of atheists in Congress, but they're not saying it.
Thank you. I've always suspected that. And unfortunately, they don't seem to be in a political environment where they can be open about that. And so I was just wondering about that.
No, it's a great question. So my dad actually was a Unitarian first. Card-carrying Unitarian, board president of his fellowship in Walnut Creek, California, then later the founding board president of the Star King School for the Ministry at Berkeley, where a lot of Unitarian ministers train. And so he was such a committed Unitarian, and he was always an atheist. But, when people asked what religion he was, he would say, I'm a Unitarian. And for about almost 32 years, nobody bothered to ask him in public, well, are you one of those Unitarians who doesn't believe in God, or are you one of the ones who does? And so it was in 2006, Secular Coalition for America, which at the time is being run by Woody Kaplan and Ron Millar, who leads our PAC. Ron Millar is the secret weapon on our team. He's the reason this congressional caucus keeps growing. They went and they had a bounty. They offered to give people $1,000 for whoever could find the highest ranking atheist in public office. And some enterprising guy in my dad's district was like, I've heard, because he wasn't, he would tell you if you asked. And so he went and he got him on the record. And, it said, the actual words he said to come out was, I am a Unitarian who doesn't believe in a supreme being. And later he said, well, yep, humanist describes me and atheist describes me, but really he's a Unitarian first. And surprised, he represented the least Christian district in the country, or one of them. It was California's 13th district, which includes Fremont, which is one of the highest proportions of Asian immigrants in the United States. So he had a lot of Hindus and Buddhists and Sikhs, and of course some Christians and Jews and Muslims. And everyone was pretty happy that as long as he was willing to come and give a speech and be there for the new ribbon cutting at the Gurdwara, they didn't really care what he was. Right now, for a long time, there was only one open atheist in Congress. When he retired in 2012, Kirsten Sinema identified with our community, then she stopped identifying with our community, and then Jared Huffman started, and for a while that was all we had. But just in January, and this is because of the work that Ron did to talk to Yasamin Ansari, a new congresswoman from Arizona, at a reception. By the way, when you fund or humanist organizations, that means we can go and talk to people at fundraisers. She said, well, I'm an agnostic. And he said, well, do you know how important it is to our community for you to be able to come out and say that publicly? How much positive representation that gives us? And she said, okay, I'll do it. And a few weeks later, Emily Randall from Washington followed, saying she was none, N-O-N-E, as a religion. And so now we're up to 3. And it's a far cry from where we need to be. I have talked with members of Congress who said, yes, I'm atheist, agnostic, but I'm not sure I want to talk about it. And we know on the other side of the aisle from Congressman Huffman, there are people who have no religious beliefs whatsoever but are masquerading. They are putting on a show, a cynical show, to try and attract people. We've got a long way to go. Part of what is going to make us successful is, and this is something the Jewish community and the LGBTQ community understand. The Jewish community does most of its political giving through Jewish PACs. My fiance used to work at J Street, which is an organization some of you may know. There's also APAC, and there are many others. And so when they those organizations send their money to the same candidate somebody would have supported, but they know it's a donation from the Jewish community. And then when those organizations go to knock on members of Congress doors, they say, oh, well, come right in, won't you have a seat? Humanists and atheists actually give proportionately to political campaigns as much as the Jewish community does. But we don't do it through organized political giving. And that's the next mountain we're going to have to climb if we want that kind of representation. I see a question.
That Barney Frank came out as gay while he was still in Congress, but he would not state that he was an atheist humanist until he retired. So there's still a lot of bias that we have to overcome.
There is. Well, and part of that, again, is the gay community is also very organized with their fundraising.
I guess I am a true atheist, but okay. I guess I am an atheist, but I don't really go out and say I'm an atheist, because who is God? What is God? And I think that this whole thing about being an atheist is, or an anti-theist or whatever, I don't know. It's because God is different to each one of us. The way we think, the way we act. I think there's God in atheism. Who is God? I don't know.
Well, at the conference where I met Mark, this was interesting. I had a woman come up to me. She was there with her husband, who was an atheist, and she said, I agree with everything you said, but I don't know if I'm a humanist because I believe in God. And I said, well, what does God mean to you? And she says, to me, God is consciousness. And I said, well, hold up. I studied developmental psychology. I believe in consciousness. I think it's a real thing that we can understand and measure. And in fact, I had talked earlier in the speech about how what humanists believe makes people special is not an immortal soul or an intelligently designed body, but consciousness, right? That's why, for instance, fetuses aren't babies, right? Consciousness is what makes us special and worth valuing. And so if you believe consciousness is important like I do, and the word you use for it is God, then we have a semantical disagreement, not a philosophical one, not a metaphysical one. And I think we've got to make people like that feel, at a time where we can't afford to lose allies, even if we're not always using people's language like they use it, we've got to make people who use different language but have the same beliefs as us feel like they're welcome in the tent.
Well, it's about 1:15, and I'm feeling hungry.
Me too, Mark.
So if you want to come to lunch with us, that's fine. But thank you for coming, and thank you,
Thank you for having me.
It was very positive and uplifting. Thank you.